Hello guys and gals, welcome back to another modeling video. I hope you have been doing well. I know I promised a big cat in my last video, but due to some issues with getting the needed supplies, I chose to do this lovely little Turán III from IBG Models in 70-second scale. I will try to make up for it by building a little poster diorama in the upcoming video for you guys. Also, I'm really sorry for releasing the video late, but life happened and stuff. Let's start with assembling the suspension and road wheels. I highly recommend a pair of good tweezers for easier installation. And something to suit your nerves, since there are a lot of small parts that have to be put together here. The good news is that the fit is excellent as usual for an IBG kit. And the parts are fairly clean and need next to no sanding. Using TAMIYA extra thin is the way to glue the kit together. Anything more thick will make the job harder and the fit worse. I also made a sort of assembly line for the suspension, since it's way easier to do this in autopilot mode. The bathtub style hull is molded well and the fit is as expected. Perfect. The part count is quite low, but it's a 70-second scale kit, no surprises here. In fact, it's a welcome change from the usual 35th scale kits I built, and just what I needed to work on. All the suspension parts and wheels fit perfectly and align in an orderly fashion. No need to use a metal ruler to get the wheels aligned. This is important since the tracks are linked and length ones, so assembling them will be much easier this way. I did it off camera, there was no usable footage, even with using tweezers. And it went much faster that way anyway. It helps immensely to prepare all wheels and suspension parts before you glue them on the hull. This way, you just have to grab the parts, attach them, and boom! Suspension done. This is especially worthwhile with German tanks, as the Schachtellaufwerk requires even more attention. It helps if you can store the parts in a medicine box, so you can differentiate parts that seem the same but have different details, such as inner and outer road wheels. The upper hull is quite detailed despite the small part count, and everything went together like a dream. It's a good idea to let the glue bond completely with the fenders first before you go on with the build process. That way it's safer to add the small details such as the lights, shovels and wire cutters. I had one issue with the hull, however. The upper front plate was missing and I had to write IBG a mail to have it replaced. Thankfully they sent me the whole sprue without asking questions, so A+ for customer service. I glued the tracks before the painting process. Generally this is a bad idea, since painting them is easier off the tank, but it was manageable here. Be sure to have some tweezers at hand for this job, since the track links are truly small and will often get lost. Tweezers are generally a good idea to have though for modeling. Don't bother too much with sanding them separately, it's easier once they are glued on. You can do it in one go. Small parts such as headlights and jacks can be a pain in the butt too. Sometimes I glue them on the hull after the painting process, since painting and weathering them is much easier off the vehicle. In this case I got away with them being glued in place beforehand. I know I sound redundant, but fine tweezers are a lifesaver and it's not a shame to use magnifying glasses either. As you can see, the tracks are already glued in place. I didn't even have to build them completely, I would have gotten away with upper ones missing. That way I could have added additional ones for an applique armor. but I'm not sure Hungarian tank crews use this tactic. You can however use spare tracks in dioramas too. The turret follows the scheme as before. Part fit and detail is excellent and would stand its own even compared to a 35th scale kit. In this case it's also an interesting design. The whole tank looks like an off-brand Panzer IV. Guess that's what you get for a low budget and upgrading it with the same 75mm gun. The only thing I hate on this kit is the abysmal amount of PE parts. These little metal fuckers only exist to attach the side skirts to the turret and the hull. It is doable even in 72nd scale, but I had absolutely no patience for this kind of crap, so I created my own parts to attach the skirts. I just used some sprue cut-offs and attached them with TAMIYA extra thin to the hull and the turret. It's not as nice and detailed as the PE parts, but it does the job and they are not that visible behind the skirts anyway. Kudos to IBG for providing the metal parts though. I'm sure there are some of us who are not making shortcuts like I do. Pick your poison. Both side and turret skirts are nicely detailed and have holes in them, creating sort of a mesh. It gives the tank an interesting and special look. The side skirts are separated as they would be in real life, so one can easily create a battle-worn tank with some of them missing and others being bent to hell. The photo etch parts are glued in place with CA glue. I tried to make them look like they only got some minor damage. You can add damage from incoming shots, skirts getting caught in obstacles by bending them, or leaving some PE parts entirely off. It's a wonderful way to create unique vehicles, and you can paint separate camo schemes on a few skirts too, in order to make them look like they were applied from a different vehicle or replaced by completely new ones. On to the painting phase. Look, I'm going to be honest with you. I mixed this color from 4 or 5 different paints and I have no clue anymore which ones, and I eyeballed the ratios anyway. So if you want to paint Hungarian tanks, buy a color set, it will be much easier. To make things easier I used the clothespin to hold the hull and turret, and due to various reasons which we won't name, because YouTube will get angry, I only had a pair of gloves. Excuse the mess. In hindsight I should have used a metal primer for the PE parts, because the green kept chipping off even with 3 layers of lacquer on top of it. But one's always learning in this hobby. Nothing but a little bit of touch-up with the brush couldn't help though. I didn't want to use the included decals since I wanted to try my hand at painting the markings instead. I used masking tape to create a black square and just sprayed black acrylic with a low pressure setting. And I had no modeling masking tape, so the green paint chipped off again. Who would have guessed? I mitigated this a bit by taping it to my freshly cleaned desk so that the glue gets a bit weaker. It certainly did help, otherwise the whole green paint would have been gone. The Y cross was easily painted on with a fine brush and diluted white acrylic paint. It's important to paint several layers until the white is opaque. Don't worry if the cross gets a bit messy, in most cases the crew hand-painted markings on the field anyways. This only adds some realism. Since I got a separate sprue with the much needed missing hull part, I also could build another turret for the diorama. I decided to paint a two-tone camouflage on it. The base green is the same as on the Turán III, the brown is just diluted German Choco brown. In this scale and after the heavy weathering, it's accurate enough. If you decide to paint fine camouflage patterns in 72nd scale, be sure to heavily dilute your paints and use a low PSI setting on your airbrush. so it doesn't create the so-called spider webbing effect. The tracks were easily hand-painted by brush using AK3086 gunmetal acrylic paint. I usually don't paint tracks in a metal color, but in this case and scale it's adequate for the desired effect. The rubber parts of the wheels were painted in a similar fashion, only using a dark remix of AK11029 black and MENG off-white acrylics. Let's start with the destroyed Turán II turret. I sprayed 3 different layers on the back of it to simulate a burned out turret. The first and biggest layer is black, and excuse the mess, gloves were hard to find during that time. The outer layer is an off-white and creates a white ash layer. Last comes the pure metal layer, which is a very light grey. This will be the base for the rust effect. Onto the exhausts. I painted it the same grey color that I used on the Turán II turret. It will be the base tone for the rust effects. I paint the same color on the jacks as well, but they will not get the rust treatment. Now that all the preparation for the real weathering is done, I can apply the wash. I used AK Interactive's dark brown wash as usual. Be sure to apply a semi-gloss or gloss coat of varnish before the washes, since the enamel thinner may remove the paint if you are not careful. It also helps to make the washes flow more evenly and reach every nook and cranny. You can remove excess wash with a cotton swab that has been soaked in enamel thinner. Let's get rusty. I bought myself a nice set of rust washes that will come in handy in the future and are very versatile. In this case I used them to create rust on the destroyed turret and the exhausts. I just stipple the 3 different tones on the light grey surface and touch up excess with a drier brush or add extra rust where I feel it's needed. This is completely up to you how much you want to add, but using reference photos or even creating reference pictures from rusty surfaces in your environment can be really helpful. Rust tones can be very different from each other, but the rule of thumb is that fresher rust stains and marks are lighter in color and have an orange hue. I try to imitate a freshly damaged turret, so I use the darker rust tones only sparsely. Again, real-life reference photos can be really helpful. Since I didn't want to create an old and overly weathered tank, I decided to at least add some earth on the vehicle. I looked up where earth, mud and rubble would accumulate and just dropped a small amount of fine earth on the parts that would gather it. I brushed the excess off with a dry brush. Once I was happy with the placement of the dirt, I just dropped a few drops of gravel and sand fixer from AK Interactive. Be very careful with this stuff, it works by melting a paint and dirt together, so if you apply pressure on the paint once the fixer is applied, you will remove it too. Once the fixer is dry, the dirt is fixed in place and won't fall off your model at all. I painted the dirt deposits with the greyish color that was also used on the diorama. To wrap things up, I sprayed a highly diluted layer of the light greyish color over the lower parts of the tank so that it looks like dust deposits on the vehicle. It's more effective than using pigments and also more in scale in this case. Let's recap. The kit is full of detail, builds up easily and is fairly cheap with its 13 euros. Only 2 issues come to mind, namely the missing part and the flimsy PE parts for attaching the side skirts. Given the excellent customer care from IBG, the former is not an issue if you happen to get the box with the part missing, and you can use the sprue parts to attach the side skirts anyway. All in all, I highly recommend this kit if you are a fan of Hungarian armor and want a kit that's easily done. If you like this video and want to see more tank related content on our page and on YouTube, please visit our Patreon site if you'd like to donate. For more interesting content, visit one of the shown outlets. Thanks for watching this video, and in the next one I will show you how to create a diorama from scratch.